Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a really fascinating one lined up for you today. Our mission is to explore a proposition called directional choice by author Amar Charani.
Yeah, it's a truly brilliant concept.
It really is. And we're going to be pulling from a stack of philosophical propositions, psychological observations, and these really practical visual frameworks from the text. Basically, the goal is to help you cut through all that modern decision fatigue we all feel.
Right, by mastering what the author calls the ultimate existential choice.
Exactly. And to kick this off, there's this strangely comforting way that early societies viewed the universe. They looked at angels and demons, and they saw beings that were, well, entirely one-directional.
Meaning they were binary? Angels couldn't choose to be bad, and demons literally couldn't choose to be good.
Right, it was pre-programmed, which meant they carried zero cognitive load about their place in the world. They never had to wonder, am I making the right choice?
Because the capacity for choice just wasn't in their nature. But then you look at humanity. Historically, this terrifying, limitless power to be a creator or a destroyer, to just oscillate freely between good and bad, that was viewed as a power reserved exclusively for the gods.
And for us.
Right. And for us, we are saddled with this godlike power of directional choice.
Which, let's be honest, doesn't always feel very empowering to you and me in our daily lives. Mostly, having that much choice just feels exhausting.
Yeah, completely exhausting. I mean, we have this capacity for limitless creativity and infinite desires, which we desperately need, right? We literally need the ability to choose to destroy old structures to create better ones.
Like demolishing a crumbling building to build a hospital.
Exactly. We need that flexibility. But the psychological friction happens when that massive civilization-building hardware is forced to process the trivialities of modern life.
The mundane stuff.
Right. This is the core of what psychology professor Barry Schwartz defined as the paradox of choice. Humanity's options are just expanding exponentially.
Yeah, in like every area of life.
Every area. We're navigating these expanded choices in higher education, super niche career trajectories, nuanced medical treatments. The text even points out the advancing reality of gender selection.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, noting that parents will soon be faced with choosing specific genetic traits for their future children out of, countless possibilities.
The cognitive load of that is just staggering to think about. But, we feel this paradox on a random Tuesday, too. The source material highlights this specific, maddening experience of going on Amazon to look for a pair of swimming goggles.
Oh, the swimming goggles example's perfect.
Right. You just search for standard goggles, and the algorithm hits you with over 5,000 options.
And when you're faced with 5,000 options, the human brain's basically just short circuits.
Yeah.
We're wired to optimize our survival by picking the best option.
Yeah.
But computationally, you just cannot evaluate 5,000 pairs of goggles.
No, of course not. So the fear of opportunity cost creeps in. You get this anxiety that a slightly better pair exists on, like page 42.
Exactly. And even if the goggles you eventually buy are perfectly fine, Schwartz's research shows you'll likely feel miserable about them. Because if they leak even a little bit, you blame yourself for not picking one of the other 4,999 options.
It's so true. It operates a lot like a computer running a web browser with 5,000 tabs open. Our mental hardware was designed to process a few simple, high-stakes choices. But the modern environment is aggressively draining our battery with all this background processing.
And the fallout from that drained battery, it isn't just internal anxiety. It has massive external consequences for the world.
How so?
Well, when our decision-making bandwidth is depleted, we default to the path of least resistance. We engage in mindless consumption. The text illustrates this with the supermarket checkout line.
Oh, right. You're tired. You've got decision fatigue.
Exactly. And you make a split-second choice to just accept a plastic bag rather than remembering to bring a reusable one.
Because it takes less than a second and it feels entirely inconsequential in the moment.
Right. But that specific micro-decision aggregates globally into a plastic pollution crisis that kills 100,000 marine mammals every year. It ends up in the digestive systems of 90% of seabirds.
That is just wild.
It is. And if the ecological impact feels too abstract for people, the text points out that this same microplastic ends up in 90% of the table salt that you, your family, and your friends consume every single day.
Wow. So the failure to filter our choices loops right back into our own bodies.
Exactly.
So if the sheer volume of choices is breaking our brains and literally colluding our environment, we need a mechanism to filter the noise. And the sources offer a structural solution here called the pyramid of values.
Right, the pyramid of values.
And the functional mechanic of this pyramid relies on an inverse relationship, right? As you climb higher up the pyramid, the sheer number of choices you have to make decreases, but their existential importance dramatically increases.
That's right. So if we look at the wide base of this structure, that represents our basic desires. This is the realm of daily routine, biological maintenance.
Like, should I eat? What should I eat?
Yeah, or am I full yet? You make thousands of these rapid-fire decisions daily. Individually, they carry very little weight. But they consume an enormous percentage of your lifetime bandwidth.
And because they consume so much bandwidth, they dictate your capacity to handle the next level up, which the text calls essential desires.
Right, and the pyramid narrows here. The volume of choices drops, but the weight grows. This is where you decide on a career path or choose a life partner.
Or figure out where to live.
Exactly. And the choices you make at that essential level serve as the foundation for the third tier, which is your fundamental desires.
Okay, and what happens at that tier?
At this level, the text argues you are essentially only making three binary choices. You're choosing between happiness or unhappiness, success or failure, and fulfillment or unfulfillment.
So everything you do at the bottom of the pyramid is ultimately an attempt to secure a positive outcome at this fundamental level.
You nailed it. Which brings us to the absolute peak, the existential desire. The pyramid funnels all the way up to a single solitary point. You only have one choice to make here.
And that choice is whether or not to pursue your purposehood.
Exactly, to pursue purposehood or not. But to understand how we actually navigate toward that peak, we have to look at the psychological mechanics of how we choose.
Okay.
The source categorizes human decision-making into three distinct operational modes. When we're overwhelmed at the base of the pyramid, we often default to the lowest energy state, which is the instinctive decision.
These are the unconscious ones, right?
Yeah, entirely unconscious. They bypass the higher reasoning centers of the brain, and they're driven purely by a biological fear of pain or a desire for immediate pleasure.
Right. The text uses the example of casual sex with a stranger. It's a drive fueled by internal instinctive desires rather than, long-term strategy.
Exactly. But we also have to navigate social environments, which triggers the second mode, the responsive decision. This is where we act based on the expectation of a specific outcome.
Like shouting to get a passerby's attention.
Right. You're treating the environment as an input-output system. You deploy behavior, like shouting, with the direct expectation of an external return, which is them turning to look at you.
It seems like a lot of our professional and online lives operate in this responsive loop.
Oh, absolutely. But the override switch for both those instinctive biological drives and the responsive environmental loops is the third mode, the directional decision.
And this type of choice is highly conscious.
Highly conscious. It requires situational awareness, and it's sparked by your core beliefs.
Yeah.
So imagine you're driving and you suddenly realize you're lost.
Okay.
An instinctive decision might be to just panic. A responsive decision might be to stubbornly follow the car in front of you. But a directional decision is pulling over and entering an address into a GPS, fueled by the belief that this tool will navigate you out of the chaos.
Now, wait, the text places an enormous emphasis on our obligation to make these directional decisions, but isn't deciding not to choose a choice in itself.
Oh, that's a great point.
Like if I realize I'm lost, pull the car over and just sit there indefinitely, I am still technically making a decision, right?
Yes. The text validates that exact pushback. You choose even when you attempt not to. Inaction is an active choice. Apathy is a choice.
Surrendering your agency to the environment is a choice.
Exactly. And this reality forces us to look at the peak of the pyramid. If inaction is a choice, and we only have one existential choice to make, whether to pursue purposehood, how does that manifest in our daily lives?
Well, the source material visualizes this using what it calls the compass of life. It categorizes human states based entirely on the direction we point our limitless creativity and infinite desires. And there are 4 distinct archetypes here.
Right. The ideal archetype is the creator. A creator points their energy in a positive direction. But what's crucial to understand about the psychology of the creator is that they are not selfless martyrs.
Right. They aren't just giving everything away.
No, the text notes that creators oscillate between selfishness and altruism. They recognize that to build a better future for others, they have to selfishly protect their own basic needs, their energy, and their boundaries.
Which makes sense. Contrast that with the default mode many of us fall into, the consumer.
Yeah, yes. The
Well,
consumer.
consumer has the exact same limitless creativity and infinite desires, but they lack direction. They're entirely lost at the wide base of the pyramid, just oscillating erratically between creating and destroying.
They bounce from one shiny object or immediate gratification to the next,
Right.
burning fuel but never moving forward.
Exactly. And then the third archetype is perhaps the most misunderstood, the martyr.
Yeah, the martyr possesses a profound misdirection. They completely surrender their own selfish needs in the name of pure altruism. But the psychological friction here is severe.
Because they refuse to replenish their own resources.
Right? Because they don't rest, eat well, or set boundaries, their system inevitably collapses. The text points out that martyrs eventually oscillate between creation and disruption, pulling down the very people they were trying to help when they inevitably burn out.
And finally, we have the destroyer. This archetype possesses limitless creativity and infinite desires, but points them in a deliberately negative direction. A destroyer oscillates between mindless consumption and toxic martyrdom, dragging their environment down with them.
So, to navigate away from becoming a consumer, a martyr, or a destroyer, the text provides a single, ultimate filtering question.
Which is?
When you're faced with those 5,000 Amazon tabs, or a complex career pivot, or even a conflict in a relationship, you ask, does this choice take me toward my purposehood or away from my purposehood?
See, applying a filter sounds logical, but it assumes you already have a perfectly defined purposehood. Most people spend decades agonizing over what their life's purpose actually is. How do we calibrate this compass if we don't have that final destination mapped out?
That's a critical distinction to make. The text suggests that purposehood is not a highly specific, rigid destination you have to uncover, like a hidden treasure.
Okay, so what is it?
It's an orientation. It's the conscious intention to add value rather than extract it. When you decide your existential direction is to act as a creator, to leave things slightly better than you found them, you have established your purposehood.
It really operates like setting true north on a compass.
Exactly.
Once you lock in that existential direction, you don't need to stop and analyze every single rock, twig, or pair of swimming goggles on the path. You just keep walking north. The basic choices at the bottom of the pyramid become significantly easier to make because the overarching framework filters out the noise.
The mechanics of setting true north are straightforward, but maintaining it requires an immense amount of cognitive resilience, especially when the environment pushes back.
Yeah, that brings up a difficult reality. Setting true north sounds great in theory, but what if life deals you a terrible hand? Does a toxic environment or systemic trauma strip away our capacity for directional choice?
The source material grounds this concept with a highly illustrative story. Charati shares an account of a creative genius who grew up in the Soviet Union. She and her siblings suffered severe neglect, raised entirely by their grandmother, while their alcoholic parents were completely absent.
And when they analyzed the trauma as adults, they uncovered this tragic mechanism behind their parents' behavior.
Right. They realized their parents were originally a highly capable, dedicated couple. But the systemic realities of the Soviet system severely constrained their personal potentiality. The state just did not permit the individual freedom required to make directional choices toward a future they wanted to build.
And the text uses a striking biological metaphor here. It argues that when a seed of human potentiality is forcibly constrained and then fed with toxic nourishment like alcohol or mindless consumerism or doom scrolling, it doesn't simply die.
No, it mutates.
Right. It grows to spread toxicity to its surrounding environment.
Her parents were the physical manifestation of constrained potential and toxic nourishment. But the text makes a sharp, unyielding pivot here. It insists that circumstance is never an excuse.
Never an excuse.
Never. We do not choose our circumstances. We may not choose our neurochemistry, the political system we were born into, or the generational trauma we inherit. But we retain the absolute power to choose our interpretation of those events and our response to them.
The material defines this through the vital distinction between pain and suffering, right?
Yes.
Pain is a biological and psychological reality. It is not a choice. It operates as an alert system.
Pain is an invitation to investigate a root cause. If you have a toothache, the pain is a signal alerting you to an issue, perhaps a diet overly reliant on processed sugar. If you experience severe emotional friction in a friendship, That pain is an invitation to analyze the dynamics of the relationship.
Suffering, however, is a choice.
Suffering is the psychological friction that occurs when you actively ignore the invitation pain provides.
Oh, I see.
If you numb the toothache with painkillers, but refuse to change your diet, the decay worsens. If you continuously cut toxic people out of your life, but refuse to examine the internal patterns that led you to befriend them in the first place, you guarantee the cycle will repeat.
So the refusal to investigate the root cause, the refusal to learn from the alert system, is the active choice to suffer.
Exactly.
I can hear people listening to this and immediately pushing back.
Oh, for sure.
Because it feels incredibly harsh to look at someone going through a devastating emotional cycle and tell them they are choosing to suffer. Is the text genuinely implying that our recurring emotional struggles are our own fault?
The philosophy doesn't shy away from that discomfort. It clarifies the stance using an anecdote from a psychiatrist friend of the author. This psychiatrist was treating a patient who had been through several highly destructive failed marriages.
Okay.
And the patient sat on the couch and lamented, life is full of selfish people. I am always suffering because none of the partners I end up with are any good.
And the psychiatrist points out a very uncomfortable truth.
He asked her, have you ever noticed that the common denominator among all of your partners is you?
Oof. It is confrontational, but it illustrates the mechanism perfectly. In this framework, struggling is entirely distinct from suffering. Struggling is the productive friction required to grow into a creator.
Right. Without the struggle of facing our own common denominators, we would never refine our direction.
But suffering only happens when we abdicate our directional choice and settle into the role of a consumer or a martyr, passively letting the environment dictate our state.
Yeah, if you are trapped in a cycle of suffering, it usually indicates a failure at the top of the pyramid. You haven't made that single existential choice to point your life toward a positive purposehood.
Let's bring the implications of this directly to you, the listener. We established earlier that deciding not to choose is a choice. You might look at this pyramid and think, well, being a creator takes a massive amount of accountability. I don't want to be a destroyer, so I'll just stay neutral. I'll remain a consumer, keep my head down, and just coast.
But the text is explicit on this point. Choosing inaction is not a neutral stance. Remaining lost as a consumer operates as a negative drag on the forward momentum of humanity.
Because every single human being represents a possible future.
Exactly. When you abdicate your directional choice, the loss of your potential doesn't merely result in a slightly lesser version of humanity. It results in a completely different timeline for the world. You possess the agency to flip the paradigm.
Yeah.
Instead of drowning in the 5,000 choices at the base of the pyramid, start at the apex. Make the one directional choice to pursue purposehood and let that orient the thousands of micro-decisions beneath it.
You control the dichotomies of your own life. You can choose a mindful existence or default to a mindless one. You can choose to be confined by the labels and reactive loops of your environment, or you can choose to step out of them. You can be a creator or you can be a consumer.
And the author offers a really grounding mantra to help reset the system when decision fatigue inevitably sets in. I breathe in choices. I breathe out ease.
I love that.
Me too. And as we wrap up this analysis, consider the vast implications of your agency. If our everyday directional choices literally sculpt the future timeline of humanity, well, what potential reality, what future innovation, or what vital connection are you accidentally deleting from the world every time you choose the mindless default of a consumer?
It completely reframes the weight of our daily routines. We are not pre-programmed entities free from the burden of choice. We wield the messy, demanding power to dictate our own direction. The next time you find your brain paralyzed by the thousands of open tabs of modern life, remember that the hardware only requires one clear input: set your true north.